Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The world of Harry Potter is filled with wonders and magic. Enchantment hides around every corner, a talking sorting hat, terrifying mandrakes in the greenhouses, bottomless trunks and tents, luck potions and love elixirs apparition, and of course, Quidditch, the dangerous yet thrilling broomstick sport. With such a setting, fans' imaginations ran wild. Over the years, they crafted countless theories, many of them seemingly too dark or too bold, until J.K. Rowling herself confirmed they were true. Today, we'll explore a few such theories officially validated by the creator of the wizarding world. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Dudley's change of heart. Throughout the story, the Dursley family played the antagonists in Harry's life, especially Dudley, the spoiled, cruel and smug boy who bullied Harry from childhood. But as the story neared its end, Dudley unexpectedly changed. Fans long speculated about what could have triggered such a transformation, and it turns out they were right. J.K. Rowling confirmed that the turning point was the Dementor attack on Dudley. In an interview, Rowling explained, "When Dudley faced the Dementors, he saw himself as he truly was for the first time. It was painful, but that's when he began to change." Later, in Deathly Hallows, he sincerely said goodbye to Harry, a moment symbolizing inner growth and genuine remorse. Number 2. The Chamber of Secrets requires maintenance. Have you ever wondered how the Chamber of Secrets remained so well preserved over the centuries? A giant basilisk, ancient runes, massive doors, everything looked surprisingly well kept. Fans speculated that someone must have maintained the chamber, and Rowling confirmed the theory. It turns out the descendants of Salazar Slytherin had secretly kept the place in order for generations. One such descendant was Corvin Gaunt, a pure-blood wizard and ancestor of Voldemort's grandfather, Marvolo Gaunt. When Hogwarts began developing its plumbing system, Corvin secretly preserved access to the chamber by disguising the entrance as part of the pipes. The chamber was opened more than once, and every attempt was carefully orchestrated. Number 3. Voldemort created a temporary horcrux. When Voldemort attempted to regain his power in the first book, he used the body of Professor Quirrell, a living, sentient human. This sparked a dark yet plausible fan theory. Was Quirrell a temporary horcrux? The answer is yes. J.K. Rowling confirmed that Quirrell was indeed a temporary vessel for Voldemort's soul. He suffered from the presence of a darker, more powerful entity, slowly destroying him from within. When Harry touched Quirrell, his body began to disintegrate. Voldemort, realizing the vessel could no longer serve him, left in time. And so ended one more horrific experiment by the Dark Lord to preserve his fractured soul. Number 4. The childlike creature in Deathly Hallows. One of the most disturbing scenes in the entire saga is Harry's encounter with Dumbledore at the bright white station after willingly surrendering to death. There, they notice something horrifying, a twisted, mutilated, helpless creature curled under a bench. What was it? J.K. Rowling cleared up the mystery. It was the final fragment of Voldemort's soul, the piece that had lived inside Harry. When Voldemort cast the curse, he unknowingly destroyed that part of himself, and this in-between world revealed it in its true, deformed form. It's the embodiment of what happens to a soul torn apart too many times, a terrifying reminder of the true cost of immortality. Number 5. Azkaban serves multiple purposes. Azkaban is not just a prison, it's a place where inmates don't merely serve time, they're fed upon by Dementors. These beings don't just guard the fortress, they feed on fear, pain, and despair. As Rowling confirmed, it was once the Minister of Magic, Damocles Roll, who decided to use Dementors as ideal guards. No salaries, no sleep, no sympathy. His successor, Eldritch Diggory, tried to change this, but failed. A special committee founded by Diggory uncovered a grim truth. The Dementors remained on the island only because prisoners were their steady food source. Without souls to devour and fear to feast on, they would leave for the mainland. Thus, Azkaban is more than just a correctional facility. It's a containment zone holding back a monstrous threat from the entire wizarding world. Number 6. Argus Filch and his eternal tragedy. Argus Filch roamed the stone halls of Hogwarts with a lantern and a scowl, muttering about muddy footprints and rule breakers. Students feared his sudden appearances and hated his punishments, but few ever wondered why he seemed to take pleasure in catching them. Filch wasn't just strict, he was broken, a squib born to magical parents, but with no magic of his own. Rowling confirmed that his anger came from deep pain, watching young witches and wizards thrive in a world that had rejected him from birth. In Chamber of Secrets, Harry finds a letter on Filch's desk, a guide to quick-spell courses for magical beginners. Filch snatches it away, humiliated. That moment reveals everything. He wants to belong, wants to cast spells, to fly, to be more than the man who scrubs floors by hand. Every student who takes magic for granted reminds him of what he was never given. His bitterness wasn't cruelty, it was grief. The grief of a man forced to live among wonders he could never touch. Number 7. Hermione's dark childhood. Before Hogwarts, Hermione Granger was a lonely girl with books and questions no one could answer. Strange things happened around her, books flew off shelves, bullies tripped without reason, lights flickered when she was angry. Her classmates whispered, teachers frowned, even her parents, kind and muggle to the core, didn't know what to do. Rowling revealed that Hermione felt like a freak long before she knew she was a witch. The discovery of her magical identity wasn't just a revelation, it was a salvation. But salvation came with a price. Once in the wizarding world, Hermione clung to knowledge like a lifeline. She read every book before school started, memorized spells before anyone else. In Philosopher's Stone, she blurts out in fear, "We could all have been killed, or worse, expelled." That wasn't just a joke. It was her fear of rejection, of being told she didn't belong. She wasn't chasing gold stars, she was fighting to be accepted. To prove every single day that a muggle-born girl could be the best witch of her age. Number 8. Why Sirius hated his family. Sirius Black didn't run away from home because of a single argument. He escaped. At 16, he left Number 12, grim old place with nothing but his wand and rage. His mother, Walburga Black, believed in blood purity like it was religion. Her voice echoed through the house in shrieks of disgust and control. Rowling confirmed that Sirius endured years of psychological torment. He was shamed, isolated, and constantly reminded that he was a disgrace to the noble house of Black. He hated the way they looked at him, like a stain. His cousin Bellatrix embraced the darkness. His brother Regulus followed Voldemort, but Sirius rebelled. "I hated the whole lot of them," he told Harry in Order of the Phoenix. The walls of his childhood home were filled with portraits of sneering ancestors. Walburga's was the loudest. "Filth! Scum! Blood traitor!" she screamed from her frame when Sirius returned as an adult. The irony was cruel. He had no choice but to use the very house he'd escaped from as headquarters for the Order of the Phoenix. But he never truly left that prison behind. Rowling said his removal from the family tree wasn't symbolic, it was survival. He chose the Potters as his real family. James became his brother, and Harry became his reason to fight. Yet even in freedom, Sirius carried the scars, his fury, his recklessness, his wild need for rebellion. It all came from years of being told he was nothing. So he became something else entirely, a Black in name only. Number 9, Neville Longbottom's damaged potential. Neville Longbottom was almost the chosen one. The prophecy could have fit him, born in July to parents who had defied Voldemort 3 times. But fate took a turn when Voldemort chose Harry. Some called it chance, but Rowling later revealed it wasn't just a decision, it was the start of a curse that changed Neville forever. Frank and Alice Longbottom were powerful auras. They would have protected their son with every ounce of magic they had. But before they could shield him, Bellatrix Lestrange found them. She didn't kill them, she broke them, using the Cruciatus curse until their minds were shattered. Neville was left in his crib crying. That magic, the pain of seeing his parents destroyed without understanding it, didn't just scar his heart, it dimmed something inside him. Rowling confirmed this. The trauma around his childhood, the disruption of protective magic, made Neville's magical growth slower. That's why in the Sorcerer's Stone he struggles to fly a broom or perform simple spells. He's clumsy, forgetful, often mocked. Even Professor McGonagall sighs at his attempts. "Why is it always you, Longbottom?" she asks. But it was never his fault. And yet, deep within, his power never left. It only waited. In the Deathly Hallows, Neville draws the sword of Gryffindor and kills Nagini, Voldemort's last horcrux. A final, silent defiance. He never had the fame, the scar, or the spotlight. But he had the same courage. The same prophecy could have belonged to him. And if not for the cruelty of a Death Eater, maybe it would have. Number 10. Molly Weasley's deepest fear. Molly Weasley never shouted at her children just to scold. Her voice shook because it carried something heavier than anger, fear. Every time Ron forgot to write, every time the twins joked about danger, she saw more than mischief. She saw coffins, 2 to be exact. Fabian and Gideon Prewett, her brothers, were murdered by Death Eaters during the First Wizarding War. They died fighting like heroes, but they died young. And Molly never forgot. Rowling once revealed that this loss left a scar Molly carried for the rest of her life. That's why she knit sweaters, packed lunches, sent howlers. That's why she begged Bill not to join the Order at first. It wasn't just worry, it was survival instinct. When the boggart in the Order of the Phoenix takes shape before her, it doesn't hiss or roar. It silently becomes the corpses of her children, one by one. "No! No! Ron, no!" she screams, collapsing. It's one of the rawest moments in the series. She was never the strongest witch, never the cleverest, but she was the fiercest, and that fury came from love so deep it bordered on terror. When Bellatrix Lestrange tried to kill Ginny in the Deathly Hallows, it wasn't a duel. It was war. "Not my daughter, you bitch!" Molly shrieked, blasting the most feared Death Eater into the floor. Years of grief, fear, and buried rage exploded in that one moment. Even after Voldemort fell, Molly never fully exhaled. She still checked windows at night, still watched the clock hands marked mortal peril, because she knew what the world could do to a family, and she had already buried too many names. Number 11, George Weasley, never recovered from Fred's death. George Weasley never laughed the same way after the Battle of Hogwarts. The day Fred died, something inside George shattered, not with a bang, but with silence, a silence so deep that even the walls of their joke shop, once echoing with spells and pranks, seemed to mourn. He reopened Weasley's Wizard Wheezes a few months later. Customers returned, laughter returned, but George didn't. He still wore the bright colours, still sold Tun-Tung toffees and puking pastilles, but the spark in his eyes, the synchronized mischief that made the twins a single force, was gone. Lee Jordan once asked if he wanted help restocking. George nodded, then turned away quickly. He didn't want anyone to see the tears. At night, in the quiet of the storeroom, he sometimes whispered aloud, "What do you think, Fred? Should we restock the canary creams?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Rowling confirmed the depth of George's grief in an interview. "It was like losing part of his soul," she said. Fred was not just his twin, he was part of George's identity. George married Angelina Johnson later, Fred's old flame. They named their first son Fred, but even that joy carried a shadow. In the Deathly Hallows, Percy finds Fred's body and screams. George doesn't scream, he just stares, as if the world stopped, because for him it did. From that day on, every smile was a little forced, every joke a little hollow. The shop thrived, but George often paused by the photo on the wall, him and Fred, arms around each other, grinning like they owned the world. Sometimes he swore the photo, Fred winked at him, and sometimes late at night George would sit in the back room and say, "I'll try to be funny for both of us." But in his heart, he knew he was only flying with one wing. Number 12, the true reason behind Snape's loneliness. Severus Snape sat alone in the shadows of the great hall, the flickering candlelight never quite touching his face. He had always kept a distance, from students, from teachers, even from Dumbledore. It wasn't pride, it wasn't arrogance, it was fear of himself. Fans have long speculated that Snape's solitude went deeper than his unrequited love for Lily Potter. J.K. Rowling confirmed that truth. Snape was terrified of his own darkness. He knew exactly what he was capable of. Snape's rage could flare like fiendfire. He once called Lily a mudblood in the Order of the Phoenix, a word that shattered their bond forever. He never forgave himself. After her death, he made a vow to protect Harry, yes, but more than that, to never let anyone close again. The pain of losing control had cost him the only person he loved. "You have your mother's eyes," he told Harry in the Deathly Hallows with a voice weighed down by 20 years of guilt. It was the closest he ever came to confession. Behind every snide remark and cruel punishment, there was a man at war with himself. He wasn't just cold, he was cautious. He feared that if he ever let someone in, the old rage would return. Snape had once served Voldemort willingly. He had taken the dark mark. He had stood beside Bellatrix Lestrange and Lucius Malfoy. The memory of who he had been haunted him, and so he buried himself in silence, sarcasm, and bitter loyalty. Only Dumbledore saw the broken pieces he tried to hide. In The Half-Blood Prince, when Snape swears to protect Draco, it's not just about the mission, it's about redemption. It's about a man trying to chain the monster inside him, but redemption is lonely. That's why Snape never smiled, never laughed, never dined with the rest. He was guarding the world from his past and himself. Number 13. The dark nature of the veil in the Department of Mysteries. The stone archway stood in the middle of the death chamber, silent and immovable, its ragged veil fluttering without wind. It was a place of study, but not of understanding. The unspeakables worked around it, not through it. No one touched the arch, no one dared. Even in a ministry built on secrets, the arch was a secret unto itself. The Department of Mysteries, with its ever-revolving rooms and time-shattering artifacts, held no object so feared, so revered as the veil. Harry Potter first saw it during his fateful infiltration of the Department of Mysteries in Order of the Phoenix. Described as an ancient, crumbling stone archway set on a raised stone dais, the arch captivated Harry instantly. It called to him, whispered to him, hummed in his ears like distant voices carried on the wind, and he wasn't the only one who heard them. Luna Lovegood, too, claimed she could hear the voices beyond the veil. "They're just lurking out of sight, that's all. You can hear them if you stand close enough." Her voice was calm, steady, as though what she said was obvious. This was not a hallucination. This was not metaphor. Rowling confirmed in a post-publication interview that the archway is a literal threshold between life and death. Those who pass through it do not die in the traditional sense. They vanish, body and soul, into a space unreachable by magic or mortal will. In the case of Sirius Black, he didn't just fall, he crossed. The veil didn't kill him, it accepted him. It completed the act of death that Bellatrix Lestrange's curse had begun. But Sirius's death had a distinct finality. When Harry ran to the dais, desperately hoping to retrieve him, there was nothing, no body, no trace. The veil was not an executioner. It was a devourer. It absorbed, consumed, and gave nothing back. There was nothing he could do, nothing. He had lost Sirius. That line in the book reads, with a dull, absolute weight. Not even Dumbledore, the most powerful wizard of his age, suggested a way to bring Sirius back. There was no spell, no ritual, no horcrux, loophole. The veil does not bargain. The idea that only certain people can hear the voices behind the veil is not poetic. It is terrifying. According to Rowling, only those who have brushed closely with death or experienced tremendous grief can perceive the murmurs of the dead. It is not a gift. It is a scar. Harry, having watched his mother die before him, having survived the killing curse, heard them. Luna, whose mother perished in a magical accident, heard them. Ron and Hermione did not. That silence in their ears is not innocence. It is ignorance of something ancient and inescapable. There is something deeply Lovecraftian about the veil. It is unknowable, alien, irreversible. The Ministry classifies it as an object of study, but what can be learned from it? The unspeakables don't experiment with the veil, they observe it. They write reports, perhaps, and measure its magic, but they do not cross it. Even the name unspeakables implies a boundary between what can be articulated and what must be endured in silence. The veil is not spoken about because there is nothing to say that can comfort the living. In mythological terms, the veil echoes the rivers Styx and Lethe, portals that separate the land of the dead from the world of the living. Once crossed, there is no return. Rowling, a classicist at heart, layers such references into her work. The veil is not a portal to the afterlife as one might imagine in Christian theology. It is a chasm into the void, a place where the soul continues but cannot reach back. A fate worse than death might be knowing death, yet being unable to share it. One cannot discuss the veil without revisiting Harry's near brush with it. As Sirius disappears beyond it, Harry sprints toward the dais, heedless of danger, desperate. Only Remus Lupin's arms stop him. "There's nothing you can do, Harry. He's gone." But was he? Sirius didn't scream. He didn't cry out. He was here, and then he was gone. The veil did not mark a painful end. It marked a quiet erasure. For Harry, this was perhaps even more traumatizing. There was no closure, no last words, no grave. Later, Dumbledore offers Harry only this: there is nothing worse than the death of someone you love. It leaves a mark. But what Dumbledore doesn't say is that the veil itself might be that mark. A wound in the world. A relic from a time before magic had ethics. The veil is not a weapon of war nor a tool of healing. It exists beyond human judgment. The unspeakables, for all their knowledge, cannot reverse its effects. The veil does not answer, it only waits. In a lesser series, this would be a setup for resurrection, but Rowling does not traffic in cheap reversals. She confirmed in interviews that Sirius's fate is permanent. There is no ambiguity. The veil is not a maybe, it is a no, a finality. Even the resurrection stone, one of the Deathly Hallows, does not breach it. The souls summoned by the stone, Lily, James, Remus, Sirius, are only shadows, echoes. They do not return. They speak with borrowed breath. They fade. Fans speculated for years that the veil might be a portal, a two-way door, but Rowling ended that debate. She described the veil as a manifestation of death, unavoidable and absolute. Unlike the horcruxes or the invisibility cloak, which manipulate death from the outside, the veil is death from the inside. To pass through it is not to be defeated, it is to be claimed. A one-way exit with no corridor back. No footprints are left on the other side. Number 14. Why Harry didn't see thestrals earlier. The thestrals waited silently at the edge of the forbidden forest, their skeletal forms almost camouflaged against the dark trunks and shadows. To most students arriving at Hogwarts in enchanted carriages, they remained invisible, phantom beasts that pulled the coaches without a trace. But for Harry Potter, something had changed. In his 5th year, he stepped off the train and saw them for the first time. Their bat-like wings, glistening eyes, and ghostly grace were suddenly undeniable. Yet this shift in perception wasn't a random magical event. It was a dark, psychological turning point rooted deeply in Harry's evolving consciousness. Harry had seen death before. He had, in fact, lived through one of the darkest murders in wizarding history. At just over a year old, he had watched as Lord Voldemort murdered Lily Potter, his mother, in cold blood. Her scream had been the last thing he heard before the killing curse rebounded, leaving him with nothing but a scar and an orphan's future. Why then could he not see the thestrals when he first came to Hogwarts? Why were they hidden from him until Cedric Diggory's death years later? For a long time, fans debated this inconsistency. Some argued that Harry was simply too young to remember his parents' deaths. Others believed that the curse's blast had clouded his perception. But one theory stood out: that true visibility of thestrals required not just the act of witnessing death, but the capacity to understand it, to feel it, to carry its weight. It wasn't enough to be in the room when a soul departed. The soul left a mark only when the heart recognized what it had lost. And this theory, as grim as it was, found affirmation in the words of J.K. Rowling herself. Cedric Diggory was more than a fellow Hogwarts student. He was the first peer Harry saw die in front of him, fully aware, without the shield of childhood or magical trauma to blur the event. Cedric's death in the graveyard, the way he crumpled to the ground under Voldemort's wand, was raw and violent. Harry felt the guilt, the fear, the horror, and he remembered. That memory did not fade. It settled like a stone in his chest, making the thestrals visible for the first time in his life. "I witnessed Cedric being murdered," Harry later reflected. "I watched him die and I couldn't stop it." This was no abstract pain. It was immediate, searing. He couldn't shield himself behind youth or myth. Cedric had been real, breathing, laughing. And then he was gone. That moment marked the true beginning of Harry's reckoning with mortality. Rowling confirmed that emotional maturity is required to see thestrals. In a 2004 fan interview, she explained, "You have to have seen death, and you need to internalize it. Harry saw his mother die, but he was too young to understand. Cedric's death brought that clarity." The thestrals, then, are not just magical creatures, they are barometers of emotional growth, visible only to those who carry death in their hearts as a lived reality. This distinction elevates the symbolism of thestrals in the Harry Potter universe. They are not marks of morbid curiosity, but companions for the grieving. They are proof that someone has crossed the threshold of innocence, has seen the veil flutter and fall. Harry, in his 5th year, had finally stepped across. The creatures welcomed him, not with malice, but with silent acknowledgement. His pain was recognized. Before Cedric's death, Harry had been surrounded by death's echoes, his parents, Quirrell, even the basilisk. But these events had either been softened by magic or removed by layers of fear and confusion. Quirrell's death, for example, happened during a chaotic struggle. It was violent, but it didn't bear the same psychological clarity. Harry didn't truly process it. Cedric, on the other hand, died in a moment of stillness, with no warning, no protection, and no barrier between Harry and the horror. The creature's invisibility, therefore, became a metaphor for Harry's blindness to his own trauma. He had been carrying a legacy of loss all his life, but only when he was ready to feel the full weight of it did his world visually shift. The thestrals had always been there, as had the pain, but now the veil lifted, and what he saw wasn't terrifying. It was solemn, quiet, respectful, a whisper of the dead woven into the fabric of the living world. Even Luna Lovegood, who had seen her mother die, offered Harry a new way to understand the thestrals. "They're not scary," she said. "They're kind, and they've been misunderstood." Luna saw them because she had watched her mother's life end in a spell gone wrong. Unlike Harry's early memory, Luna's experience had been conscious. She had grieved, cried, and remembered. The thestrals had come to her not as monsters, but as silent acknowledgments of her sorrow. In this light, the thestrals become reflections of emotional truth. They appear only when denial is no longer possible. For Harry, this moment arrived not with the death of a parent, but with the collapse of a boy his age, someone he had stood beside only seconds before. Cedric's death was a cruel, senseless loss. Not a sacrifice, not a heroic ending, but a cold reminder of Voldemort's return and the fragility of life. When Harry looked at the thestrals, he was no longer a child. He had crossed into a world where safety was an illusion. The magical world had stopped being whimsical and had begun to resemble the darker truths of human experience. This was the shift Rowling masterfully encoded in the creature's visibility. The audience may not have seen the change immediately, but it was there in the shadowed edges of Harry's growing silence, his haunted looks, and the depth in his eyes. Number 15. The Death Prophecies of Professor Trelawney. Professor Sybil, Trelawney stood in the shadowed corner of the divination classroom, her eyes always half-clouded, her words drenched in incense smoke and the flicker of crystal balls. Most students rolled their eyes the moment she opened her mouth, bracing themselves for another melodramatic prediction about certain death or terrible misfortune. She was theatrical, often absurd, and undeniably strange. But hidden beneath the layers of shawls, glassy-eyed stares, and sherry-soaked mutterings, there was something the students could never quite grasp. Her gift was real and far darker than they could imagine. When Lavender Brown screamed during her first divination class because Trelawney had just declared she saw the Grim in her cup, it was laughed off as classic Sybil nonsense. But not long afterward, Lavender experienced the devastating loss of her beloved pet rabbit, Binky. To the untrained eye, it was a coincidence. To those who spent enough time examining patterns and recognizing the clues Rowling so carefully embedded in her text, it was an omen, the first of many that would go unnoticed. J.K. Rowling confirmed that Sybil Trelawney, despite her quirks and apparent fraudulence, was a true seer. Her trances, when they did happen, unleashed chilling truths that would only be understood in retrospect. But what fans hadn't considered deeply enough was that her morbid obsession with death wasn't random. It was, Rowling admitted, a response to the impending doom brewing beneath the surface of Hogwarts, an intuitive sensitivity to the magic of tragedy about to unfold. One of the most bone-chilling examples of this was her forewarning to Harry Potter in The Prisoner of Azkaban. She looked at him with fear and stated, "My dear boy, you have the Grim." At the time, Sirius Black's animagus form, a large black dog, was stalking him from the shadows, misunderstood as a death omen. Harry, of course, survived, but the presence of Sirius wasn't just a red herring, it was a symbolic precursor to death indeed, not Harry's, but Sirius's own. As Rowling revealed, Sybil's death-sensing talent was not always precise in identity, but it rarely missed its target in essence. The Grim pattern continued. In The Goblet of Fire, Trelawney refused to sit at a table of 13 during a Christmas dinner. When Dumbledore insisted, she was forced to join the table, and Dumbledore himself stood up to greet her, making him the first to rise. The superstition goes that the first to rise from a table of 13 will be the first to die, and so he was. Albus Dumbledore, the headmaster who had always protected Hogwarts, fell at the hands of Severus Snape, fulfilling an ancient and ominous belief which Trelawney seemed to understand on a bone-deep prophetic level. What appeared to be superstition and melodrama was, in reality, an early warning system embedded in Sybil's very being. Rowling explained that true seers don't often understand the full nature of what they predict. Their minds struggle to interpret what their magic shows them. Trelawney's mind, overwhelmed by trauma and danger swelling around her, interpreted the coming storm in the only way it could, through constant and creeping visions of death. In The Half-Blood Prince, after Dumbledore's death, Trelawney becomes even more paranoid, frequently heard mumbling about omens and dark energies surrounding the castle. Students, now hardened by war and fear, still don't take her seriously. Yet again, she is right. The Battle of Hogwarts is drawing closer, and with it, a cascade of deaths that will shake the wizarding world to its core. Her mutterings were ignored, her instincts tragically undismissed. Perhaps the most disturbing instance came not in the form of a direct prophecy, but a pattern of subtle premonitions. She claimed she had predicted the death of a student in every year she taught, a chilling claim. On the surface, no such trend seemed to exist. But look closer, and the deaths around Hogwarts mirror her timeline like shadows on a wall. Cedric Diggory in the Triwizard Tournament, Sirius Black in the Department of Mysteries, Albus Dumbledore on the Astronomy Tower, Fred Weasley in the Battle of Hogwarts, Colin Creevey, Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, all of them in some way were connected to Sybil's time at the school. It wasn't that she named them directly. Her gift didn't work that way. But her overwhelming obsession with death was a kind of spiritual radar. Rowling clarified that true prophecy in the Harry Potter universe doesn't come in clarity, it comes in symbols, signs, and deep emotional impressions. Sybil felt the death pressing in like a fog. Her fragile psyche couldn't decode the images into coherent statements, so it came out instead as hysteria, dramatics, and talk of grim omens. Her second true prophecy, "The Dark Lord will rise again with his servant's aid, greater and more terrible than ever he was uttered in a trance during an interview with Dumbledore. That single moment, dismissed by Umbridge and others as an accident or a fit, shaped the fate of the world. Even she didn't remember giving it. Her own mind blocked it out. This disconnect, Rowling explained, was a protective measure of the seer's own subconscious, a defense against the overwhelming trauma of seeing death too vividly. Her strange relationship with Harry also reflects this. She was terrified of him from the beginning. While it might be chalked up to nerves or theatrics, consider this. Trelawney had given the prophecy that made Voldemort choose Harry as his equal. She may not have remembered it consciously, but something deep inside her recognized him. Perhaps her discomfort was less about nerves and more about the aura of destiny that clung to Harry like a shroud. Her death predictions in his presence weren't meant to mock or frighten. They were warnings, echoes of a doom that hadn't yet arrived. Number 16. Why Draco couldn't kill Dumbledore. Of all the moments that defined the sixth book, none carried more weight than the scene atop the Astronomy Tower. The wind was howling, the night was thick with doom, and Albus Dumbledore stood, weakened by a potion, facing the young man he had known since boyhood, Draco Malfoy. Wand in hand, Draco trembled, his pale face ghostly in the moonlight. His mission was simple in words, monstrous in deed: kill the headmaster or perish along with his family. But Draco could not do it, and it was not hesitation out of incompetence or fear. It was something far deeper, something Rowling would later confirm. Draco Malfoy, despite everything, was not a killer. Raised in a family steeped in dark tradition and obsessed with blood purity, Draco had long mirrored the values of his father, Lucius Malfoy. From his earliest years at Hogwarts, he belittled Hermione for being Muggle-born, ridiculed Ron's poverty, and tried, desperately, to prove his superiority over Harry. Yet all of it, this toxic performance, was the armor he was taught to wear. When Voldemort returned, Draco's family, once secure in their influence, fell out of favor. Lucius failed at the Department of Mysteries, and the Dark Lord needed new leverage. He turned to Draco, not out of trust, but as punishment. The boy's task was impossible. It was a death sentence veiled as duty. Draco's assignment was not merely to kill Dumbledore, but to infiltrate Hogwarts, repair a vanishing cabinet, and allow Death Eaters inside the castle. This task he carried out with near-obsessive focus, shutting out his friends and growing pale and hollow. His deterioration did not go unnoticed. "He looks ill," Hermione once remarked, and Harry, despite his suspicions, recognized the change. This was not the cocky Draco from their earlier years. Something was unraveling. In Half-Blood Prince, the narrative shows Draco slipping into isolation. He stops eating. He avoids laughter. He patrols the corridors alone. He has nightmares, and in perhaps one of the most telling scenes, moaning Myrtle finds him weeping in the bathroom, not angry, not plotting, crying. Rowling writes he was rocking backward and forward slightly, clutching his face in his hands. This is a child suffocating under the weight of his own fate, not the behavior of a remorseless assassin. The moment atop the tower becomes a crescendo of this internal agony. Dumbledore, weakened and disarmed, stands with open arms. "Draco," he says gently, "you are not a killer." Those words are not an accusation, they are a lifeline, and Draco, for all his indoctrination, does not strike. He lowers his wand, paralyzed. Rowling later confirmed in an interview, Draco was not capable of murder. He was afraid, yes, but it was more than that. He had been raised to believe certain things, but he couldn't follow through when faced with the true cost. There were moments, scattered throughout the series, that hinted at this buried humanity. Draco's reaction to Buckbeak's attack in Prisoner of Azkaban was overdramatic, but lacked venom. In Goblet of Fire, his mockery of Cedric Diggory felt more like rehearsed cruelty than genuine hatred. And in Order of the Phoenix, he watched as Umbridge's reign created fear and unrest, but never stepped into her shoes. He was cruel in words, but rarely in action. The darkness Draco was asked to embrace was not abstract. The threat was clear. Do this, or your parents will suffer. Narcissa, his mother, was already desperate. She violated the Dark Lord's rules to plead with Snape. She did not believe her son could survive the burden placed upon him. She begged Snape to take an unbreakable vow to protect Draco if he failed. "He doesn't have the stomach," she whispered. And she was right. Rowling painted Draco with complexity, not redemption. He was not innocent. He was not kind, but he was human. And it is this humanity that turned his mission into torment. Standing before Dumbledore, he saw not a symbol of resistance, but a man. An old man with piercing eyes who did not beg for his life, but offered Draco a way out. "Let me help you," Dumbledore said, and though Draco refused, his wand wavered. The trembling was real. The killing curse never came. It was Severus Snape who performed the deed. And he did so not out of loyalty to Voldemort, but because of that vow. The murder was arranged, not spontaneous. Snape killed Dumbledore, and Draco was spared, though the cost was his soul. Afterward, he was never the same. Even when Voldemort seized control, Draco faded into the background. In Deathly Hallows, he cannot meet Harry's eyes at Malfoy Manor. He does not celebrate when Harry is believed dead. He tries, subtly, to help. At the Battle of Hogwarts, Draco does not fight. He searches the castle not to destroy, but to find his friends to escape the chaos. He calls out for Crabbe and Goyle. He is a child lost in a war. And when Voldemort offers him a place among the Death Eaters, calling, "Draco, come," the hesitation is deafening. Narcissa and Lucius plead with their eyes, and Draco, with visible reluctance, steps forward, not in triumph, but in surrender. Rowling's confirmation of Draco's inability to kill is not a gesture of absolution, but of tragedy. It places him among the many victims of Voldemort's terror, not blameless, but broken. The tragedy is not that Draco failed, but that he was ever asked to do it, that a child was given the task of ending the life of a man like Dumbledore, that his upbringing made him feel he had no choice, that his failure was met not with punishment but silence. The world moved on. Draco did not. Snape's intervention allowed Draco to live but not to heal. Even 19 years later, when Harry sees Draco at King's Cross with his son, there is no malice between them, just distance, a shared memory of war, and the unspoken acknowledgement that they both lost something. Draco no longer plays the villain. He is a man of quiet gestures and unspoken regrets. The darkness, Rowling confirms, is not in what Draco did, but in what he couldn't. He couldn't bring himself to kill, he couldn't run, he couldn't cry for help. He stood frozen, trying to reconcile his family's legacy with the unbearable truth that he did not want to be a killer. In the Malfoy line, that was seen as weakness. In the eyes of readers, it became his most human trait. When Dumbledore fell, it was not at Draco's hand, and yet the moment changed Draco forever. He had crossed a threshold, not of murder, but of understanding. He saw what cruelty truly looked like, what sacrifice felt like, what fear could do. And in that moment, he realized that survival was not the same as victory. He would live, but he would never again be whole. In interviews, Rowling explained that Draco's arc was intentionally subtle. He was not meant to become a hero, but to show how indoctrination and trauma distort identity. Draco is a product of his environment, she said, but he is not without a conscience. His hesitation on the tower was not cowardice. It was the soul screaming against annihilation. A final gasp of the child he had once been, before fear took root. When Harry tells his son, Albus, in Cursed Child, that Draco never really became a Death Eater, he speaks not of tattoos or titles, but of heart. Draco may have worn the robe. He may have followed the path, but when the moment came to kill, his heart faltered. That faltering saved his soul. That faltering condemned him to live with the knowledge that he almost became what he feared most. The tragedy, as Rowling affirms, lies in the silence that follows. Draco is never thanked. He is never punished. He simply fades, a boy who couldn't kill, living in a world that demanded he should. His story is not one of redemption, but survival, not of forgiveness, but endurance. And that, perhaps, is the darkest truth of all. Number 17, Hogwarts ghosts are souls that can't let go. The ghost of the Bloody Baron haunts the dungeons of Hogwarts with a silence far more deafening than any wail. His armour, stained with the blood of the Grey Lady, clinks with each footstep, though he drifts weightlessly through the stone corridors. Students whisper about his terrifying glare, but few understand the sorrow buried behind it. The Bloody Baron was not always a monster. He was once a man consumed by love, rage, and regret. His story, long buried beneath centuries of whispers, reveals the dark truth behind all the ghosts of Hogwarts. None of them are at peace. They are not charming remnants of the castle's past. They are echoes of torment, frozen in the moment of their greatest sorrow. Joanne Rowling, in an interview published years after the final book, confirmed a chilling theory that had haunted the fandom for years. Ghosts, she revealed, are not merely magical quirks. They are souls that could not bear to move on. These are not beings who choose immortality out of whimsy. They are spirits trapped by fear, guilt, or refusal to let go of something they cherished, or something they regretted. Wizards can leave an imprint of themselves upon the earth, to walk palely where their living selves once trod, she explained. But the wisest know that it is better to go on. Ghosts are those who could not bear to depart. Nearly Headless Nick is perhaps the most visible and friendly ghost at Hogwarts. His jolly demeanour masks the anguish of a man who was denied the one thing he craved most: dignity in death. Nicholas de Mimsy-Porpington was executed after a magical mishap that left a woman permanently tusked. His partial decapitation, botched with a blunt axe, left him unable to join the Headless Hunt, a group of spirits who gallivant about in the afterlife. Nick's final humiliation, the way his head hangs by a mere inch of flesh, mirrors the limbo of his soul. He did not fear death. He feared being forgotten, being mocked, being incomplete. So he stayed, forever almost headless, forever longing. The fat friar, Hufflepuff's ghost, beams at students with a warm smile. He floats about the corridors as if still carrying out his duties, helping lost first years and watching over the kitchens. But even his gentle soul hides an unspoken tragedy. He was executed by his own brethren, betrayed by the very church he served. His crime? Healing people with unapproved magic and pulling rabbits out of the communion chalice just for fun. His death was not only unjust, but infused with betrayal, a deep sense of disillusionment that lingered into death. He was not ready to forgive those who had turned on him. So he remained trapped in the only place where he had once been trusted. The Grey Lady, the ghost of Ravenclaw Tower, is not merely a silent guide. She is Helena Ravenclaw, daughter of the great Rowena. She fled with her mother's diadem, a relic of immense magical power, driven by jealousy and a desire for recognition. Rowena, heartbroken and dying, sent the Bloody Baron, then a man in love with Helena, to retrieve her. What followed was a scene soaked in blood and despair. When Helena refused to return, the Baron, in a rage, murdered her, and, upon realizing the horror of his actions, killed himself. The two ghosts now haunt the same school, eternally separated by their shared grief. Helena's regret, the shame of betraying her mother and causing her death, clings to her like the silver mist that trails her movements. "I stole the diadem," she confesses in Harry Potter, and the Deathly Hallows, her voice trembling. "My mother's diadem, the Baron, he killed me, and now I am just a shadow." The truth about ghosts in the wizarding world is not one of peace, but one of torment. These souls linger not because they are powerful, but because they are broken. Peeves, while technically not a ghost but a poltergeist, is often dismissed as comic relief, yet his chaotic nature may stem from the residue of centuries of conflict and repression within the school. He is the physical manifestation of unrest, of mischief born from centuries of youthful rebellion and unresolved tension. He is not tethered to a singular tragic moment, but to the accumulated energy of a place filled with unspoken grief. Ghosts in Hogwarts do not bring comfort. They are living or unliving proof that even in a world of magic, not all wounds can heal. They do not age, they do not change, and they do not forgive. They exist as relics of their final emotions, whether it be shame, rage, fear, or regret. Each one is locked in a loop, forever repeating the echoes of their last living moments. They serve as eerie moral warnings, walking parables wrapped in transparent flesh. Moaning Myrtle, perhaps the most tragic of them all, haunts a forgotten bathroom. Killed by the basilisk under Tom Riddle's command, she died in confusion and terror, mocked by her peers and left alone in her final moments. Her obsession with her own death, her need for attention, and her constant weeping are not merely character quirks, they are symptoms of trauma. She cannot move past the moment she died. She relives it endlessly as though the world stopped when her life did. Her cries are not comic relief, they are the wails of a soul that cannot let go. "I died in this very cubicle," she tells Harry bitterly. "I remember it so well. I'd hidden because Olive Hornby was teasing me about my glasses." Rowling's revelation reframes everything we thought we knew about the ghosts of Hogwarts. The school, often seen as a place of warmth and wonder, also houses some of the saddest remnants of wizarding history. These spectres are not anomalies, they are symptoms. Hogwarts, for all its grandeur, is also a monument to sorrow. It is a place where magic touches death, where the boundary between life and the afterlife is perilously thin. The ghosts are the scars it cannot hide. In The Order of the Phoenix, when Sirius Black explains the difference between ghosts and the dead who have gone on, he is firm, no spell can reawaken the dead. This underscores that ghosts are not true returns of loved ones. They are echoes, often uninvited, always incomplete. They cannot offer comfort, only reminders. Sirius, who is haunted by his own past, knows the cruelty of half-presence. It is worse than absence. The decision to remain as a ghost is not a wise one in the wizarding world. Dumbledore, who has faced death more closely than most, explains that it is a feeble imitation of life. He tells Harry, "You will find that I will only truly have left this school when none here are loyal to me." He did not become a ghost because he had made peace. His absence is his gift, the proof that not all must stay to be remembered. Ghosts are incapable of learning, of growth, of healing. Their knowledge is frozen at the point of death. Nearly headless, Nick admits this to Harry after the loss of Sirius. "I was afraid of death," he says. "I chose to remain behind. I sometimes wonder whether I oughtn't to have—" "Well, that is neither here nor there. In fact, I am neither here nor there." His words echo his condition, trapped between worlds, between peace and pain. This tragic limbo is what binds all Hogwarts ghosts. They are reminders of choices made in terror, of lives ended abruptly or with unresolved anguish. They are not metaphors, they are truths, spelled out in translucent flesh. The Bloody Baron's silence is not stoicism, it is penance. The Grey Lady's floating sorrow is not serenity, it is mourning. The Fat Friar's kindness is not joy, it is a desperate attempt to restore balance where none can be found. Even in death, these souls served the school. They interact with the living not out of choice but out of compulsion. Nick helps Gryffindors because he cannot help himself. The Fat Friar comforts Hufflepuffs because it gives his eternal limbo some structure. But none of them can move on. They watch generations pass but never cross the veil themselves. The finality denied to them is the prison they inhabit. Hogwarts is a castle built on ancient stones, on power and knowledge, but also on sorrow. It is a sanctuary, a battlefield, and a mausoleum. The ghosts are not its oldest inhabitants. They are its most wounded. They linger in its halls, not to inspire, but to warn. To remain behind is not romantic. It is a tragedy, a choice made in pain that leads to a forever of watching, never living, never leaving. It is tempting to think of ghosts as teachers or mentors. But the true mentors, Dumbledore, Lupin, Sirius, even Snape, do not return. They leave lessons behind, not shadows. The ghosts of Hogwarts leave only reminders. They are the price of regret. They are the souls who looked into death and turned away, not out of courage, but out of fear. In the end, the ghosts of Hogwarts represent what magic cannot fix. A wand cannot erase guilt. A potion cannot mend a shattered soul. A charm cannot guide the unwilling to peace. These beings are not triumphant survivors. They are the unfinished sentences of the wizarding world, sentences that echo through stone corridors and drift through classroom walls. They do not scare, they grieve, they do not haunt, they linger. And as they linger, they remind every student who walks those halls the choices made in life matter, because death in this world does not always bring freedom. Sometimes it brings only reflection without release. Number 18. The Cursed Origin of the Monster Book of Monsters. When Harry Potter first encountered the Monster Book of Monsters, he was not prepared for the assault. The book sprang to life with gnashing teeth, growls, and an aggressive hunger for anything that moved. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, the textbook snarled, snapped, and had to be kept bound with a belt. But what many dismissed as just another quirk of the magical world has, over time, evolved into a chilling theory that fans whispered about in online forums and fan conventions. Eventually, J.K. Rowling herself confirmed their darkest suspicions. The book wasn't enchanted just for fun, it was cursed, and it was dangerous. The Monster Book of Monsters was originally designed to accompany the care of magical creatures curriculum, and in particular the lessons of Rubeus Hagrid. Its erratic behavior was thought to reflect the whimsicality of its keeper. But there's a darker origin hidden behind the leathery cover and snapping jaws. Rowling revealed that the first version of the book was created by a reclusive magi-zoologist named Thaddeus Grimsbane, a figure lost to legend who had once lived in the shadowy marshlands of northern Wales. Known in his time as a half-mad zookeeper of doom, Grimsbane's obsession with magical beasts went beyond scientific interest. It bordered on spiritual possession. He was said to believe that to truly understand a creature, one had to infuse their essence into writing. He built his first prototype of the monster book using dragonhide for the cover and filled its pages with hair, feathers, skin, and even blood samples of the creatures he described. But the darkest magic came when he bound the book with enchantments meant to simulate fear and survival. He didn't want readers to merely learn about monsters, he wanted them to feel hunted. To ensure this, Grimsbane used a combination of aggression-triggering hexes and sentient scripting, an unstable form of spellwork that allowed the book to read the temperament of its holder. If it sensed timidity or disrespect, it attacked. If it sensed curiosity mixed with confidence, it remained calm. This wasn't protective magic, it was psychological warfare. The intention was never to help students pass exams, it was to teach them terror. By the time it reached Flourish and Blots, the Monster Book of Monsters had already undergone generations of transformation. Each copy wasn't printed, it was replicated through magical cloning, meaning the core enchantments intensified over time. Each book was, in essence, a descendant of the original, inheriting its instability. That's why Harry's copy needed to be subdued by stepping on it and prying it open with brute force. For him, the book sensed uncertainty. "It's not a book, it's a bloody trap," George Weasley once joked, though few knew how literal that statement was. Interestingly, not every student experienced violence from the book. Hermione Granger, upon receiving her copy, reported that it barely stirred. She later remarked, "I stroked the spine and it purred." This seemingly innocent detail reveals something deeper. The book mirrored the reader's mental state. Hermione's confidence and methodical approach calmed the spells woven into its pages. Others, like Neville Longbottom, were not so lucky. His copy reportedly bit through 3 layers of robes and was only subdued when Professor McGonagall stunned it in front of the class. The Ministry of Magic grew concerned after several injury reports from Hogwarts and other magical institutions across Europe. The Department of Magical Education convened a committee in 1991 to investigate the ethical implications of using the Monster Book of Monsters as standard curriculum. Internal memos, which later leaked through a WizLeaks scandal, revealed serious debates about banning the book entirely. One memo read, "No educational tool should require students to master fear before knowledge." But Hagrid, with his unwavering trust in magical creatures and his unorthodox teaching style, insisted it taught respect. His logic? If you're scared of the book, maybe you're not ready for the beast. But Rowling later clarified that Grimsbane's intentions were not educational, they were punitive. He believed that fear bred focus. In his fragmented journal, later recovered from the ruins of his estate, he wrote, "Let their fingers bleed if it makes their minds sharp. Knowledge should be won through struggle." This ideology horrified even the most progressive magical scholars. Many began referring to the monster book as the Grimsbane Codex, hoping the ominous name would deter its use, but like many cursed objects in wizarding history, it endured. The spells used to animate the book were not solely mechanical. According to magical linguists at the Institute of Arcane Literature in Vienna, the monster book contains a latent form of animus manus, an ancient, semi-conscious magic that allows books to evolve. That's why older editions have been found to possess new chapters no wizard ever wrote. In 1993, a Bulgarian wizard discovered a copy that included a chapter on the Romanian longhorn that wasn't present the year before. The theory? The book adds what it learns, which means it's watching. Some scholars have even speculated that the book feeds on experience. Every time a reader is injured or startled, a trace of magical energy is left in the book's fibers. This energy accumulates and deepens the enchantment's unpredictability. In other words, the more it's used, the more dangerous it becomes. A particularly rogue copy stored in the vaults of the French magical archives once leapt 6 feet into the air and clawed its way out of a locked chest. It took 6 auras to subdue it. Grimsbane's name may have faded into the mist of time, but his legacy endures in every shrieking page and snapping spine. Some believe he intentionally cursed the book not just to teach fear, but to trap fragments of his soul. The theory posits that each book is a partial horcrux, not in the Voldemortian sense of immortality, but a lesser echo, a ghostly whisper embedded into ink and parchment. This would explain why no 2 books behave the same way. Each copy contains a sliver of Grimsbane's essence, modified by the experiences of every reader it encounters. There's one chilling tale that emerged from Durmstrang Institute in 1981. A student named Lev Petrov vanished for 3 days after opening his assigned copy of the monster book. When he was found, he was curled up in the restricted section of the library, muttering the names of beasts that had been extinct for centuries. His copy was confiscated and studied, and researchers found not just known entries, but pages describing creatures no witch or wizard had ever documented. Some entries were written in blood, others in languages long dead. The lingering question remains, why did Hogwarts, a school renowned for protective enchantments and safety measures, allow such a book into its curriculum? The answer, ironically, might lie in tradition. The monster book had been part of the Care of Magical Creatures syllabus since at least the 1700s. Over time, its behavior was romanticized and its danger was treated like an eccentricity. As Dumbledore once remarked in private letters, magic without madness is merely arithmetic. Let the student struggle. It tempers the spirit. Rowling has made it clear that the book's presence in Prisoner of Azkaban was no accident. It represented a shift both for Harry and for the readers. The whimsy of the first 2 years was giving way to darker truths. The monster book wasn't just a prop, it was a symbol. The protective layers of Hogwarts were thinning, and monsters, real or otherwise, were beginning to claw their way in. Even now, the legacy of the monster book continues to unsettle those who research magical education. A conference in 2023 held by the International Federation of Enchanted Learning debated banning the book permanently. The final resolution? The Monster Book of Monsters, while historically significant, poses a continued threat to young magical minds and should be restricted to faculty-only use under containment spells. It's unclear if Hogwarts has abided by this suggestion. Perhaps the most damning piece of evidence lies not in magical documents, but in the book itself. In a rare annotated edition found in the attic of the late Professor Kettleburn, the previous Care of Magical Creatures instructor, a handwritten note was found scribbled on the inside flap. If it starts whispering, burn it. Not all monsters live in the forbidden forest. Some lie in wait on dusty shelves, their spines eager to snap and their pages itching to scream. And for every student who calms the monster book, another walks away with scars on their skin or in their memory. For in the wizarding world, even the textbooks have teeth. Number 19. The madness behind the Mirror of Erised. The Mirror of Erised stood tall and silent in the forgotten chamber, its gilded frame etched with the mysterious inscription that, when read backwards, whispered, "I show not your face, but your heart's desire." To the untrained eye, it was merely an ancient relic. But to those who stood before it, something inside stirred, an ache, a longing, an irresistible pull toward the impossible. It was in that cold room, hidden beneath the castle's sleeping halls, that Harry Potter first met the mirror's gaze and saw not himself, but the family he had never known. Their faces shone with pride and love. And in that fleeting moment, the orphaned boy felt whole. The scene was poignant, yet the magic that wove it held a thread of darkness rarely acknowledged. Over time, whispers grew louder in the corners of the wizarding world, that the Mirror of Erised was not merely a window into the soul's yearning, but a prison of the mind. These rumors were long dismissed as fanciful paranoia, until J.K. Rowling herself, keeper of the world's secrets, revealed a grim truth buried within the mirror's origin. Its magic was not born of hope, but of despair. Rowling explained that the mirror's origins lay in the shadowed centuries of the Middle Ages, when magic was wild and unregulated, shaped by human longing as much as wand lore. A nameless wizard, consumed by grief over the loss of his parents, retreated into exile. History forgot his name, but his pain endured in the artifact he left behind. Refusing to accept their deaths, the wizard poured every ounce of his magical ability into crafting a mirror that would reflect not the world, but his deepest desire, to see his parents once more. And he did. They appeared before him, radiant and smiling, suspended in the silvered glass, like ghosts that breathed. The mirror worked too well. Day after day, the wizard stared into its depths, speaking to his imagined family, waiting for them to step through the glass. But they never did. He stopped eating. He stopped sleeping. The warmth left his body as his soul froze in the endless winter of illusion. By the time other wizards found him, he had lost the power of speech, unable to distinguish between dream and truth. The mirror had not healed him. It had devoured him. Albus Dumbledore, centuries later, would encounter the mirror and understand its peril. A young academic at the time, Dumbledore's mind was sharper than most, but even he confessed in a rare moment of vulnerability, "I see myself holding a pair of thick woolen socks." But it was a lie. What he truly saw, his family whole, Aberforth forgiving, Ariana alive, was too painful to admit. The mirror, to him, was a beautiful poison. Harry's fascination with the mirror, though fleeting, gave readers a glimpse into its seductive power. He returned night after night, sitting before the glass for hours. As Rowling warned, the happiest man on earth would look into the mirror and see only himself exactly as he is. Harry saw a version of his life that could never be, and he clung to it. It was Dumbledore who intervened, moving the mirror and warning, "It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live." Many fans speculated that the mirror's magic bordered on sentience, that it adjusted the intensity of its illusion based on the viewer's emotional vulnerability. Rowling's revelation seems to support this. The mirror is not a passive object, but a parasitic one. It feeds on longing, reinforcing obsession by offering false fulfillment. In doing so, it erodes the line between fantasy and reality. The case of the medieval creator served as a haunting cautionary tale. Some magical historians believe his descent was not unique. During the 14th century, the Mirror of Erised was briefly catalogued in the Forbidden Artifacts Registry under the name Speculum Desideri. The entry noted the item caused progressive emotional dissociation in prolonged exposure. Yet despite these dangers, it was never destroyed, too powerful, too alluring to cast away. What's more chilling is that the mirror may have retained echoes of its creator's madness. Magical theory proposes that objects imbued with intense emotion can act as vessels for residual energy. In the mirror's case, grief and desperation may still resonate within its glass, subtly influencing each new viewer. Harry, despite his strength, felt this pull. So did Dumbledore, so did the nameless others who stood before it and failed to walk away. The mirror's destructive potential is not limited to individuals. In the wrong hands, it could become a tool of manipulation. Imagine a dark wizard using it to expose the desires of others, fears, secrets, ambitions, all laid bare in the reflection. The mirror could be a weapon, not of physical harm, but of psychological warfare. It could unravel alliances, blackmail the innocent, and seduce the vulnerable. Rowling's account of the mirror's origin added a new layer to its legacy, one of sorrow and caution. It was never meant to be a gift, but a monument to loss. The unnamed wizard did not intend to curse the world. He simply wanted to see his parents again. But in reaching for what was lost, he created something that traps others in his place, a cycle of yearning repeated through the ages. There is a literary beauty in the mirror's design. It doesn't show what you need, but what you want most, and wants, as we know, can be dangerous. Hermione Granger once said, "Her fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself." In the case of the mirror, the fear lies not in its name, but in its truth. It is desire without anchor, a reflection of the soul's most fragile hope. The mirror's story mirrors our own relationship with memory and loss. How often do we dwell on what might have been? How often do we replay moments, wishing they had ended differently? The mirror of Erised gives form to this human habit, but it exacts a cost. The longer one stares, the harder it becomes to return. To look into the mirror is to gaze into a life unlived, and to love it more than your own. Even Voldemort, though never shown using the mirror, exemplifies what happens when desire overpowers reality. His longing for immortality and power made him blind to the humanity he cast aside. Though he never sat before the mirror, he was its perfect victim in spirit, a man so consumed by what he wanted that he lost sight of what he was. Rowling's confirmation of the mirror's origin didn't just expand its lore, it cast a shadow across one of the series' most beloved moments. Harry's vision of his family is no longer a comfort, it is a warning. The love he saw was not real, and the time he spent there, precious and lost. What saved him was not the mirror, but the man who moved it. To this day, the mirror's whereabouts remain a mystery. Some believe Dumbledore destroyed it. Others think it still lies somewhere in Hogwarts, guarded by enchantments and forgotten staircases. Wherever it is, its power endures, undiminished by time. It remains a relic of both beauty and peril, a quiet threat behind shimmering glass. The tragedy of the mirror is that it offers no evil spell, no curse that can be lifted. Its danger lies in its purity. It does not deceive, it does not lie. It shows exactly what your heart wants, and in doing so tempts you to abandon everything else. It does not kill with force, but with seduction. It is a slow, gentle undoing. And yet we understand why someone would stand before it. We understand the wizard who made it. We understand Harry. That is the mirror's final cruelty. In its reflection, we do not see monsters, we see ourselves. Number 20 moaning, "Myrtle's death was planned." The girl who died in a bathroom stall had a name, Myrtle Elizabeth Warren. She wasn't popular, she wasn't brave, she wasn't beautiful. She was, by most accounts, a lonely, crying girl whose voice never mattered much. But the tragedy of her death echoes far beyond the cracked tiles and grimy sinks of that forgotten girl's lavatory, because what many once believed to be an unfortunate accident, a cruel twist of fate, is now, with the words of J.K. Rowling herself, recontextualized as a calculated, almost surgical act of dark precision. Myrtle didn't just stumble into the path of a deadly beast. She was marked, her movements known, her habits studied, her vulnerabilities exploited. In the year 1943, Hogwarts was a school seething with fear and suspicion, but in the quiet shadow of fear, Tom Marvolo Riddle was calm, coldly calm. Behind his pristine prefect's badge and immaculate manners, he moved like a serpent, elegant, deliberate, coiled with deadly intent. That year, students were falling ill, one by one, as the Chamber of Secrets was said to have been opened again. A centuries-old legend had come to life, and the monster of Slytherin had begun its silent hunt. But there was a moment, one single death, that set it apart from myth. Myrtle's, the only fatality, the only soul extinguished, not a random strike, not a moment of bad luck, but a planned murder. Rowling confirmed it with chilling clarity. Tom Riddle did not merely unleash the basilisk to wreak havoc. He timed it, he strategized, he chose his victim. In an interview, Rowling admitted that Tom had identified a moment when students were least likely to be together, and that he knew where Myrtle liked to go when she was upset. That knowledge wasn't accidental, it was the result of calculated observation. Tom had been at Hogwarts for 5 years. He had watched, he had listened, he had learned not just magic, but people. He had a gift for uncovering their weaknesses, understanding their fears, predicting their behaviors. And Myrtle? She was a creature of routine despair. Her refuge from teasing whispers and cruel laughter was always the same: the girls' lavatory on the 2nd floor, the one nobody liked to use. It had become her sanctuary. It became her tomb. When Tom opened the chamber, it was not with a reckless hunger for chaos. He had a purpose. As he would later confess in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, he wanted to prove himself, to show he was the true heir of Slytherin. But proving himself wasn't about spectacle. It was about precision. I had to be sure, you see, I had to be certain that I could control it, he had said. Control. He wanted mastery. And that meant testing the weapon, not in a hallway, not during a feast, but in isolation with a solitary target. Myrtle had cried that day. She often cried. Olive Hornby had teased her about her glasses again, and Myrtle had run, sobbing, to her familiar hiding place. She buried her face in her hands, inside a stall, waiting for the silence to return, when she heard the hissing. It was unlike anything she had heard before, and though she didn't understand the words, they drew her out. "Then as I tried to tell them I died," she had wailed decades later to Harry and Ron, "I just remember seeing a pair of great big yellow eyes." The basilisk didn't wander. It didn't hunt in wild patterns. It was summoned, directed, instructed. Tom Riddle, fluent in Parseltongue, had told it where to go. He didn't stand back and watch from a distance. He was close, close enough to know it had succeeded, close enough to hear the death scream that no one else did. And when she fell, awkward, frightened, unloved, Myrtle became more than a name. She became a sacrifice. Tom knew the school would close if a student died. He even said so to Dumbledore, feigning concern, manipulating the very system he sought to infiltrate. "So I decided to do a bit of investigating myself," he said to Dippet, "because I thought it must be someone inside the school." But it was him, always him. That's the monstrous irony. The hunter pretending to be the helper. Rowling has often referred to Tom Riddle as a psychopath in the making. But that's too soft a label. A psychopath may kill out of impulse. Tom killed to test a theory. Myrtle's death wasn't a message to Hogwarts. It was a private experiment. And it worked. He knew then what he needed to know, that he could command the serpent, that he could kill unseen, that he could mold history in the palm of his hand. And after Myrtle's body was found, he moved quickly. He framed Hagrid. He used Aragog, the innocent acromantula, as a scapegoat. He painted himself as a hero. He won the award for special services to the school. All the while, the real monster slithered back into the pipes, waiting for a new master, or perhaps for the old one to return in a new form. Myrtle, meanwhile, remained, bound to the scene of her death. A ghost, yes, but also a witness. And though she cried for decades and haunted the very place where she had fallen, no one truly listened. Her story was reduced to comedy, her moaning a punchline. But she remembered. And when Harry opened the chamber again 50 years later, she was the first to provide the clue. "She was talking to me, Hermione," Harry had said. "Myrtle told me someone was talking in there in a funny language." That funny language was Parseltongue. That same language Tom had used, that same hissing voice that called the serpent to its prey. Myrtle had not misunderstood. She had recognized the danger too late. What's haunting is not just the murder, but the method. Tom Riddle didn't want to kill hundreds. He wanted one. Just one. Enough to test the monster, enough to close the school, enough to justify hiding the chamber again and vanishing into the orphanage for the summer with a triumphant smirk. He had no need for slaughter. He had something worse, patience. This level of cold strategy marks a turning point in the evolution of Tom Riddle. The act of murder itself was already monstrous, but the way he executed it speaks to his transformation. Myrtle was a symbolic victim, a muggle-born girl, helpless, mocked, discarded. She fit the myth of Slytherin's purest vision, and so Tom Riddle gave the legend life by ending hers. Her murder was also the first soul torn from his own. Though not confirmed in the moment, Rowling has said that Myrtle's death became the origin of his first horcrux, the diary, a diary that later nearly killed another girl, Ginny Weasley, that same diary that Harry stabbed with a basilisk fang, that same diary that spoke with Tom's 16-year-old voice. In that sense, Myrtle became more than a victim. She became a thread in the tapestry of Voldemort's immortality. Her final scream echoed into eternity, captured not only in the plumbing of a haunted school, but in the ink-stained memory of dark magic. That Myrtle's death was purposeful reframes her entirely. She wasn't a casualty. She was the foundation of a plan that would span decades. From her death would rise a reign of terror, a transformation of a boy into a monster, a tale of fragmented souls and forbidden magic. Her death wasn't the end of her story, it was the beginning of his. Tom Riddle's manipulation of the timeline, his knowledge of when to strike, reveals something else too, that he understood fear better than most adults. He knew that one death, carefully timed, would terrify the school more than a dozen petrifications. A murder meant parents would pull their children from Hogwarts. It meant headlines. It meant Dippet would panic. And in that panic, Tom gained power. It was also perhaps the moment he realized how easy it was to deceive. His performance to Headmaster Dippet was masterful. "I had to try and stop it," he claimed. "I thought I might catch the person who'd done it." But Dumbledore, watching quietly, must have suspected. He said nothing, but he watched, as always. Years later, Dumbledore would tell Harry, "Very few people are capable of speaking Parseltongue without having inherited it from Salazar Slytherin. This is what makes you a Parselmouth, Harry." But Tom had that gift, and with it he committed a murder that changed the school forever. Myrtle's ghost remains behind, not as comic relief, but as a symbol of tragedy. A girl no one cared to understand, a death no one thought to question until now. And when Rowling herself, the mother of this universe, affirms that Myrtle's death was not random, it sends ripples through the narrative. We are forced to confront the story we thought we knew. The bathroom is still there, still broken, still leaking, still avoided, but it is more than a ruin. It is a crime scene, the first step in a war. And Myrtle's sobs, they're not annoying. They're grief. They're memory. They're a warning, and perhaps above all, they are the echoes of a murder long misunderstood. Until now, number 21, Lavender Brown, could have lived, but was abandoned. Of all the deaths in the Battle of Hogwarts, Lavender Brown's end remains one of the most unsettling, not because of its brutality, but because of the silence that surrounds it. A Gryffindor known more for her schoolgirl crushes than her dueling prowess, Lavender was often dismissed by readers as frivolous, even comedic. But the night of the battle tore away all such labels. She did not die in a blaze of glory, but in a shadowed corridor mauled by Fenrir Greyback, while help arrived just a breath too late. According to J.K. Rowling herself, Lavender could have survived if someone had reached her moments earlier. This bitter acknowledgement has ignited one of the darkest theories among fans. Lavender was left to die. Not maliciously, but through neglect, distraction, or perhaps the simple, cruel logistics of war. The final time we see Lavender in the text of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows is devastatingly brief. "Two bodies fell from above," Rowling writes, and Hermione screamed. One of the bodies moved and raised its arm. Lavender Brown's face was pale and her eyes were closed. The ambiguity is chilling. Is she alive? Has she just fainted? But the moment is soon overtaken by action. Greyback is thrown back by a curse from Trelawney, and the story thunders on. Lavender is never mentioned again in the books. In film, her fate is even more definitive. Her lifeless body is sprawled on the floor, eyes wide open, blood on her neck, a death presented as fact, but canon lies with the books. And in the books we are left with a silence that fans have tried to fill for over a decade. It wasn't until Rowling confirmed Lavender's death in a post-publication interview that the ambiguity was laid to rest. "She did die," Rowling said. "She was gravely injured by Greyback, who was not in full werewolf form, but she did not survive." What struck readers most was what followed. Rowling added that Lavender had a chance to survive had help reached her earlier. In those words lies a quiet accusation. In a castle filled with defenders, spells and strategy, a young student still died alone, without immediate aid. The question is not only how this happened, but why. The chaos of the battle offers a partial explanation. The Death Eaters stormed Hogwarts from multiple fronts, splitting the defenders across various floors. Professors like McGonagall and Flitwick held the entrances. The Order of the Phoenix duelled in the Great Hall and on the grounds. Students from Dumbledore's army fought wherever they could, some defending younger pupils in the Room of Requirement, others joining the fray. Lavender, older than many, had chosen to fight. She was not a background figure. She was a witch in a war. The fact that she was alone in a corridor speaks volumes about either the spread of the fighting or a tactical misstep. Either she broke away from her group, or her group left her behind. Greyback's role is crucial in this story. Fenrir Greyback is no ordinary werewolf. He's a predator who delights in terrorizing and devouring children. When attacking outside the full moon, he doesn't transform completely, but still becomes vicious and inhuman. His strength increases, his senses sharpen, and his bloodlust overtakes him. That he was even allowed near the school is a mark of the utter breakdown of magical security. During the battle, he specifically targets students. Lavender was just another name on his list. But unlike others, her final moment wasn't amid a crowd. She was cornered. According to Rowling, Greyback attacked Lavender while not fully transformed, but still capable of inflicting mortal wounds. The corridor was quiet. No screams alerted others. When Hermione and Trelawney arrived, they were too late to stop the attack, only to avenge it. The implications are disturbing. Hermione, Lavender's former rival in matters of the heart, became the one who found her. Trelawney, the professor whose teaching Lavender once adored, was the one who cast the spell that sent Greyback flying. There is poetic symmetry here, but it comes drenched in blood. Lavender was not saved by them. She died just before they arrived. What happened in that corridor will never be fully known, but based on Rowling's comments, it's clear that Lavender was still alive, perhaps barely, when she was found. A heartbeat more, a few steps faster, and she might have lived. That might burns brighter than any spell. It introduces a sense of haunting injustice. Could she have been stabilized with a potion? Could Madame Pomfrey have healed her if brought in time? The wizarding world boasts remedies for most injuries, but timing is everything. And Lavender, as it turns out, simply didn't matter enough to be found sooner. This is where the theory turns from tragedy to something darker. Fans have questioned the prioritization of students during the battle. Harry, Ron, and Hermione naturally took center stage. Ginny was fiercely guarded, especially by her mother. Neville and Luna were frontline fighters, but others, Lavender, Parvati, Seamus, faded into the blur. Did Lavender's earlier reputation as silly or emotional cause others to underestimate her? Did her absence from the central narrative leave her more vulnerable? In war, value can become dangerously subjective. Some fighters are shielded, others are sacrificed. The Ministry's later classification of her death as accidental in the course of combat adds a final insult. This bureaucratic phrase, used for civilian and collateral losses, implies no blame. It smooths over chaos with administrative gloss, but in Lavender's case, it ignores the question of failure. If a student can die on school grounds, not from a direct duel, but from being hunted by a known predator, then the protective network failed. That she died in a corridor, not a battlefield, not the courtyard, but a corridor, underscores the horror. It suggests exposure where there should have been protection. Her death was not cinematic. No final words. No farewell. Lavender didn't fall beside a friend or in the arms of a teacher. She fell alone, and that aloneness echoes louder than the violence. For a series that often romanticizes noble death, Lavender's is a brutal reminder of what war actually looks like. Blood in silent hallways, missed chances, and forgotten names. Even the text itself forgets her after that line. Lavender Brown's face was pale, and then she's gone. The loss stings more when we remember who Lavender was. Before the war, she was vibrant, expressive, and unafraid to feel deeply. Her romance with Ron may have drawn ridicule, but it revealed her vulnerability. She loved openly. She believed in signs and omens. She took divination seriously, a class most mocked. She leaned into wonder. She laughed loudly. She existed fully. Her life was not subtle, and neither was her death. Yet it was brushed aside in favor of louder narratives. Professor Trelawney, one of the few to arrive after the attack, is a tragic figure in this tale. The professor, often marginalized by her peers, was one of the only ones who tried to protect Lavender. In a rare moment of courage, she hurled a crystal ball at Greyback. It's a striking image, the seer of fragile predictions fighting a monster with a glass orb. But it was a gesture born too late. And that lateness is everything. The moment had already passed. Lavender's chance had already slipped through the hourglass. Hermione's role is more complicated. She never liked Lavender. The rivalry over Ron created a divide between them. But in that corridor, it didn't matter. Hermione screamed when she saw Lavender fall. That scream wasn't for a rival. It was for a fellow human being. But, again, it was delayed. She arrived not in time to stop the horror, but only to witness its aftermath. She was brave, she acted, but the cruelty of the moment was that she couldn't do enough. It is also worth noting that Lavender's death serves no narrative function. Unlike Fred, whose death shatters the Weasley family, or Remus and Tonks, whose bodies symbolize the cost of adult sacrifice, Lavender's passing doesn't alter the plot. It's an ambient loss. This makes it feel more real, more random. She didn't die to teach anyone a lesson. She didn't die to push the story forward. She just died. And in a way, that is the most authentic depiction of war. Not all deaths are meaningful. Some are just awful. The theory that Lavender was abandoned is painful because it feels plausible, not intentionally, but circumstantially. In the fog of battle, students were spread thin, communication was broken, protection was focused on known targets. Lavender was not one of them. She wasn't Harry, or Ginny, or Luna. She was just another student who chose to fight. And her bravery cost her everything. The tragedy is not just that she died, but that her death was almost invisible. Even within the Gryffindor house, where bravery is revered, Lavender's sacrifice was never formally acknowledged. No eulogy, no portrait, no tribute. Fred received tears and shouts. Snape, despite his crimes, received memories and revelations. Lavender? She received a half-sentence and an interview footnote. In this silence lies the sharpest wound. Death is final, but being forgotten is worse. Lavender's memory deserved more. The theory haunts readers because it strips away the clean lines between heroism and neglect. It suggests that in war, some are simply unlucky, but it also dares to imply that Lavender's death might have been preventable. That if her housemates had searched harder, if the patrols had been wider, if someone had checked the corridor just a moment sooner, she might have lived. That's the ache that lingers, not just that she died, but that she almost didn't. In fan forums and essays, readers have attempted to rewrite her fate. They imagine Seamus finding her in time, or Professor Sprout using a healing plant. They envision Luna discovering her and whispering comfort. These rewritings come from a place of guilt, as if we, the readers, abandoned her too. As if our failure to notice her in earlier chapters mirrored the character's failure in the final one. Lavender Brown was not the brightest student, not the most powerful witch, but she was human. She loved, laughed, fought, and in the end, died. And though she did not fall with fanfare, her story continues to echo, precisely because of how quietly it ended. In that silence, many have heard a scream, and some still wonder if it came just a moment too late. Number 22, Voldemort's loveless soul wasn't just about the potion. Many fans of the Harry Potter series are aware of the cold and calculated origins of Lord Voldemort, born Tom Marvolo Riddle. They know the dark tale of Merope Gaunt, a witch from a decaying pure-blood family who fell obsessively in love with a handsome muggle named Tom Riddle Sr. Under the influence of a love potion, he stayed with her long enough for her to conceive a child. But when the effects of the potion wore off and she released him from the enchantment, he abandoned her without a second thought. Merope died giving birth, and the child, born loveless and orphaned, would grow into the most feared dark wizard of all time. J.K. Rowling once revealed that the potion's role in Tom's conception contributed to his inability to love. Yet a darker theory, whispered by fans and supported by Rowling herself, suggests that the child born that night did not simply lack affection, but emerged into the world already damaged in a deeper, metaphysical way. Rowling acknowledged this eerie notion during an interview, confirming that Tom Riddle was more than just emotionally stunted. He was what ancient wizards would have called a hollow vessel. In The Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore reflects on Tom's past and comments on his early behaviors. Even as a child in the orphanage, Tom displayed cruelty and manipulation. He was a Parselmouth, Dumbledore told Harry. He could make things move without touching them, make animals do what he wanted without training them. He could make bad things happen to people who annoyed him, frightened him. This level of control, especially at such a young age and outside a wand's assistance, was rare and disturbing. The Gaunt family was already soaked in a legacy of madness and decay, the remnants of Salazar Slytherin's bloodline, polluted by generations of inbreeding. Marvolo Gaunt, Tom's grandfather, was violent and delusional. His son Morphin was criminally unstable, imprisoned in Azkaban for attacking muggles. Merope herself was emotionally broken and described as nearly incapable of casting simple spells when Dumbledore visited the Gaunt shack. This cursed lineage, already teetering on the brink of magical collapse, produced a child not merely burdened by dark heritage, but perhaps irrevocably fractured by it. When Tom Riddle was born, there was no celebration, no touch of warmth. Merope died in childbirth, refusing to use magic to save herself. In her grief and despair, she left her child to the mercy of the Muggle world. The absence of maternal care and the lack of any loving bond is significant, but not unusual in itself. Many orphans grow up without love and yet retain their capacity for empathy and kindness. But Tom Riddle, from the beginning, showed no interest in connecting with others. He did not crave affection, he craved power. Dumbledore, who met Tom at the orphanage, sensed immediately that something was wrong. The boy was charming in a cold, calculated way. He was intelligent and articulate, but displayed a chilling enjoyment in cruelty. There are some kinds of damage, Rowling once said, that happen before birth. She described Tom Riddle as a receptacle so warped that the love potion did not simply deny him love, it was only one ingredient in a far more dreadful mixture. She compared his birth to the forging of a weapon rather than the arrival of a child. Legends among old wizarding families spoke of children born under magical imbalance, when spells, curses, or forbidden enchantments interfered with the soul's anchoring to the body. These children, though physically normal, exhibited coldness, obsession, and a lack of emotional resonance. Some called them cursed heirs, others soul-thin. In ancient magical texts, these were described as vessels lacking the golden thread that binds man to man. They could perform magic, sometimes with exceptional force, but were said to be dangerous, even as infants. It is no coincidence that Tom Riddle began to manipulate others before he was even 11. He collected trophies, trinkets from other children at the orphanage, objects he had stolen and hidden in a box. One child spoke of Tom luring another boy into a cave from which he returned terrified and mute. These were not simply acts of curiosity, they were the cold experiments of a child who already understood dominance, fear, and control. Rowling pointed to these early signs as evidence of a soul that never properly took root. The love potion may have played a role, but there was also the effect of ancestral magic, a cursed bloodline, and a birth under emotionally dead circumstances. When Voldemort began creating horcruxes, he was not merely dividing his soul, he was mutilating something that was already incomplete. In The Half-Blood Prince, Slughorn explains, "You must understand the soul is supposed to remain intact and whole. Splitting it is an act of violation, it is against nature." But Tom's soul, from the beginning, had never been intact in the first place. This perhaps explains why he was capable of creating not just 1 or 2 horcruxes, but 7, an act so monstrous it defied belief. Rowling later explained in interviews that Tom Riddle's soul had been so diminished that by the time he tried to kill Harry, only a fragment remained. "He was less than a ghost," she said, "not even truly alive. He existed in a state of magical instability." This makes his obsession with immortality more tragic, more twisted. He was desperate to preserve something that had never been whole. He feared death, not because he cherished life, but because he feared the abyss of his own non-being. The magical theory of soul damage at birth is further supported by Dumbledore's observation that Voldemort could not understand love. When Harry declares that Voldemort doesn't know love or friendship, Dumbledore affirms it. "That power, Harry, you have never been tempted by the dark arts. Never. That power was your mother's sacrifice, and it lives in you still." Voldemort's inability to grasp this power was not simply a character flaw, it was a metaphysical void. In Deathly Hallows, when Voldemort enters the Forbidden Forest to face Harry, Rowling describes him as snake-like and less than a man. The image is more than physical. He has become a creature without soul, his essence corrupted beyond recognition. Even his voice is described as high and cold, lacking resonance, as if his very presence is unnaturally suspended between life and death. In the scene at King's Cross, where Harry meets Dumbledore after being hit by the killing curse, he sees a small, shriveled, whimpering thing under a bench. Dumbledore refuses to touch it, saying, "You cannot help." Rowling confirmed that this was the last remnant of Voldemort's soul, a tortured, incomplete fragment that could neither die nor heal. It had been so shattered, so altered, that no magic in the world could repair it. The final horror of Voldemort's story is that he was not simply a man who chose evil. He was, in part, created by a web of darkness he never chose. Curses passed through blood, a love potion that hijacked nature, a mother who died of despair, and an orphanage where he learned fear before he learned language. This does not absolve him, it deepens the tragedy. The boy who might have been a great wizard was never truly given a chance to be human. Rowling explained that she wrote Voldemort's backstory with intention. "I wanted readers to understand that evil is not always a choice made in adulthood. Sometimes it begins in the very way a child is brought into the world. The choice to conceive a child under enchantment is a violation not only of the partner, but of the child's soul. Magic, in this case, was not a tool for love, but a weapon against it." Contrast to Voldemort, characters like Harry, even when deprived of love, still seek connection. Harry, too, was orphaned, raised in a loveless environment, and treated with cruelty. But his soul remained whole. His mother's sacrifice gave him protection, yes, but it also preserved the integrity of his being. Voldemort, born of a lie, from blood soaked in madness and control, never received that gift. Even Snape, a character who straddles the line between dark and light, is capable of great love. His soul is battered but functional. He grieves, he sacrifices, he regrets. Voldemort never regrets. He punishes failure, he manipulates, he kills, but he does not mourn. That is the ultimate symptom of the soul's collapse, the absence of mourning, of reflection, of pain for others. There are hints throughout the books that ancient magical families knew of such cursed births. The Gaunts, with their obsession for blood purity and disdain for outsiders, ignored the warning signs. They believed themselves superior even as their line decayed. They thought their magic would endure, but magic without compassion becomes poison. And in the case of Tom Riddle, that poison distilled into a monster long before he cast his first spell. Thus the horror of Voldemort lies not only in his deeds, but in his very origin. He was born not merely loveless, but soulless in a way that no spell could reverse. Rowling's acknowledgement of this truth doesn't remove his agency. Rather, it reveals how the darkest magic can corrupt not just lives, but creation itself. Number 23. Harry's Parseltongue. Dreams were a psychic invasion. Harry Potter's first encounter with Parseltongue was not a triumph. It was a whisper, a sound, not a language, not yet. Long before he understood its meaning, Harry dreamt of slithering. He heard hissing behind locked doors. He woke up in cold sweat, gasping, his scar prickling. Most dismissed it as stress or nightmares, common enough for a boy with his history. But fans who paid attention noticed a deeper, darker thread running through these visions, and eventually J.K. Rowling herself confirmed it. Harry wasn't just dreaming, he was being touched, penetrated by Voldemort's consciousness. The serpent's voice was not his imagination, but a psychic leak. A fragment of Voldemort's soul inside Harry reached out in the deep silence of sleep, and sometimes it reached back. The dreams began in earnest in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Harry dreams of a turban whispering to him, he will return. Very soon, he will return, even stronger. And he wakes with a start. It's easy to miss. It's a dream in a children's book, but Rowling planted the seed right there. In retrospect, it wasn't just a cryptic foreshadowing, it was a coded message. The turban, of course, belonged to Quirrell, possessed by Voldemort. But more than that, the voice hinted at something brewing deep inside Harry's mind, something trying to crawl forward from the darkness. As early as the Chamber of Secrets, Harry's connection to snakes intensified. In the dueling club scene, he shocks everyone by talking to a snake, revealing his gift as a Parselmouth. "What do you mean you were speaking English? I heard you speaking Parseltongue," Ron tells him. Harry is shaken, but what's more disturbing is that he had heard the same voice before, in the walls, in his bed, always in whispers. He just didn't know it wasn't English. The realization that he had been unknowingly speaking the language of dark magic unsettled him more than he admitted. It wasn't a skill learned, it was an inheritance, and not from his parents. The theory among fans grew with the release of Order of the Phoenix. In that book, Harry's dreams take a new turn. He doesn't just hear snakes, he becomes one. He was gliding along the corridor. He was the snake. He was the snake, and he was attacking. The scene is vividly described as Harry, in his sleep, witnesses, or experiences firsthand, Nagini's assault on Arthur Weasley. He feels the coils around the victim, senses the thirst for blood. When he wakes, it's with horror. This is not a dream. This is possession. J.K. Rowling confirmed that Harry's visions were real transmissions. Voldemort, unknowingly or not, was using the connection to send and receive emotional and sensory information. Harry was a horcrux, and the part of Voldemort's soul inside him acted like a two-way radio. When Voldemort's emotions were intense, hatred, rage, triumph, The psychic pressure broke through into Harry's mind. But the scar was not the only conduit. Dreams, especially in sleep when the conscious mind relaxes its grip, allowed the link to strengthen. Rowling later revealed that the piece of soul in Harry was not inert. It was alive. Not intelligent, perhaps, but sentient in a strange way. It yearned for reunion with its master. When Voldemort rose again, the fragment inside Harry stirred. It began to pull, and Harry felt the pull as pain, as nightmares, as whispers in a forgotten tongue. The serpent was speaking to itself, one head in the boy, one head in the Dark Lord. Some of Harry's worst moments were shaped by this. Consider Goblet of Fire when he returns from the graveyard and collapses in Dumbledore's office. His scar burns so badly he screams. Later, he has visions of Voldemort in conversation, torturing others, plotting. At first, Dumbledore blocks him out, fearing the link could be used to spy. But the truth was more disturbing. The link was natural, internal. Voldemort didn't create it. He was merely learning how to exploit what already existed. By the time Harry begins his occlumency lessons with Snape, the connection is a full-blown psychological battleground. Snape warns him, "Close your mind, Potter," but the dreams get stronger. The Department of Mysteries, the hallway, the door that will not open. Harry obsesses over them, not because they matter to him, but because they matter to Voldemort. The snake is whispering again, and this time it isn't vague, it is directive. Rowling described this period as the war within. Harry is not merely being influenced, he is being haunted. The memories he glimpses of flying through the air, of rage, of torture, are not fantasy. They are memories, Voldemort's own, bleeding into Harry's mind via the horcrux. Dreams of the Forbidden Forest, of a cave filled with screaming, of a woman dying, all borrowed from the Dark Lord's past. Sometimes Harry cannot tell what is his and what is foreign. That was the point. This explains a subtle detail many readers miss, why Harry grows darker. In Order of the Phoenix, he's angrier, more irritable, less trusting. Many assumed this was teenage angst or trauma, but consider that every night a sliver of Voldemort was pressing against his psyche, poisoning it with fear, paranoia, rage. Harry didn't just carry the horcrux, he felt it, and at night, when no one was watching, he spoke in hisses and heard replies. The theory also explains why, upon the destruction of the horcrux within him in Deathly Hallows, Harry's dreams stop. The pain fades, the whispers are gone. It is not just Voldemort's death that severs the link, it is the surgical removal of the parasite in his mind. "I think I've known for a while," Harry tells Dumbledore at King's Cross, "that part of Voldemort was in me." The phrasing is gentle, but the reality is gruesome. For 16 years, Harry was possessed by something that never stopped whispering. Even before the Horcrux was understood, Dumbledore feared this. He suspected the connection early. That's why he distanced himself in Order of the Phoenix. Not because he didn't care, but because he was terrified. Voldemort had opened Harry's mind like a door. A single error might let him step through. The serpent was not just speaking, it was searching. In hindsight, many of Harry's sleepless nights read like spiritual invasions. The hissing behind walls, the cold sweat, the loss of self. Voldemort, split as he was, used the Horcrux like a bloodhound. When his physical body was weak or fragmented, the fragment in Harry became an antenna. The dreams were not just side effects, they were part of the curse. A striking example comes in Half-Blood Prince, when Harry, after chasing Draco, experiences a vision of Voldemort's fury. He sees the Dark Lord punishing his Death Eaters, feels the pain of disappointment. The timing is eerie. The attack was not directed at Harry, yet he reels from the psychic aftershock. Even when not targeted, the emotional blast reaches him. The Horcrux does not need words. It needs pain. It is also telling that Harry never dreams of Lily or James. No visions of his parents, no comforting flashbacks. Only the snake. Only death. It's as if the Horcrux strangled any attempt at normal dreaming. Where most boys his age might imagine Quidditch or friends or romance, Harry saw graveyards, corridors, death. The parasite decided what was worthy of memory. In one disturbing scene, just before Dumbledore's death, Harry experiences a dream so vivid it wakes him shaking. A woman is begging, a scream echoes, and then the hiss of Nagini. Rowling later admitted that these were not dreams, but memory echoes. Voldemort's past and present experienced in real time by Harry. The soul fragment inside him was yearning, and the only way to express that yearning was through nightmares. The confirmation from Rowling did not surprise close readers. She had seeded it for years, but her admission that the Horcrux was active in its attempt to communicate with Voldemort cast everything in a harsher light. Harry was not just a passive vessel, he was an unwilling participant in a conversation he never asked for, and every whisper was a syllable in a language of pain. Consider how it began. A baby marked by a scar, a mother's scream, and a failed curse. But the curse didn't just rebound, it implanted, and the dreams, the hissing, the pain, these were the side effects of being a human Horcrux. A Horcrux is not just an object, it is a wound, a leaking, seeping wound between souls. The dreams were the pus of that infection. And when Harry finally walks into the Forbidden Forest to die, there are no whispers. The snake is silent. That silence is louder than any hiss. It is the absence of intrusion. For the first time, he is alone in his mind. The death that follows is, ironically, the first moment of peace he's ever known. And when he returns, resurrected by choice, the connection is gone. The Horcrux is dead. The dreams will never return. What haunts readers is not just the idea that Harry was mentally violated for years, but that he never really had a choice. He never agreed to be the snake's ear. He never invited Voldemort in. And yet, night after night, the voice came. Sometimes with fangs, sometimes with fire, but always whispering, always watching. The serpent's language was never truly foreign. It had lived inside him all along, waiting, listening, and only when the soul fragment was destroyed did Harry finally hear what silence sounded like. Number 24. The Slytherin locket carried 2 generations of hatred. The locket seemed ordinary at first glance, silver, heavy, old-fashioned, but it pulsed with a quiet malevolence that no spell could disguise. When Dolores Umbridge wore it, she grew more venomous than ever, thriving on the suffering of others. When Ron Weasley carried it, his love twisted into jealousy, and friendship rotted into suspicion. In the forest, the trio fought more than they ever had, and always when the chain of that locket pressed against one of their chests. Many readers believed the locket's influence stemmed solely from the fragment of Voldemort's soul it carried, yet a deeper theory took shape among fans. They speculated that the locket's darkness was not born with Voldemort, but came from an even older source. When questioned, J.K. Rowling confirmed this unsettling truth. The locket was cursed long before Tom Riddle ever laid his hands on it. Salazar Slytherin had crafted the locket centuries before, embedding it with his own arcane enchantments. Known for his contempt toward Muggleborns, Slytherin infused the artifact with a dark, discriminative power. It wasn't merely a symbol of family pride, it was a vessel of ideological corruption. Rowling revealed that the medallion was steeped in Slytherin's original magic, which responded to bloodlines, reacting to those it deemed impure. It whispered cruel judgments, played tricks with one's confidence in, and deepened feelings of alienation. The medallion didn't just corrupt, it divided, it fed on inner fractures. Voldemort didn't create that evil, he amplified it. Before Voldemort transformed it into a Horcrux, the locket had passed through generations of the Gaunt family, Slytherin's last known descendants. Morphin Gaunt wore it when he spat venom at the world, blaming Muggles for every misfortune. His sister Merope wore it as she withered away in despair, its poison quiet but persistent, reminding her she was nothing, even with magic. The gaunt shack stood in decay, its walls echoing madness, the locket a quiet sentinel of generational rot. When Tom Riddle found it, he didn't just see a family heirloom, he saw a mirror. Tom Riddle's obsession with heritage drew him to the locket like a moth to flame. He felt kinship in its cold power. He studied it, cradled it, learned its whispers. Rowling has stated that even before the Horcrux ritual, the locket had a presence, a consciousness warped by centuries of magical disdain. It was never a neutral object, it was waiting. Voldemort chose it not by chance, but by recognition. The locket reflected his hatred of the unworthy, his worship of blood purity. When he tore his soul and sealed it inside, the medallion didn't resist, it welcomed him. The curse of Slytherin was no longer dormant, now it had teeth. The true horror of the locket lay not in its curses, but in its silence. It didn't scream, it didn't lash out, it whispered. Rowling described it as a slow poison, not a sharp blade. It fed on insecurity, stoked paranoia. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione passed it between them, it knew their weaknesses. For Ron, it chose jealousy. For Harry, doubt. For Hermione, loneliness. The locket didn't invent these emotions, it inflated them. A fragment of Voldemort's soul stirred these things, but the locket's ancient enchantments twisted them into weapons. Ron's outburst in the forest wasn't just stress or Horcrux magic. It was the combined hatred of two men, Salazar Slytherin and Lord Voldemort, pressed against his chest. "Why are you here? Why are you even doing this?" he had snapped at Harry. But it wasn't really him. It was the voice of the locket, echoing doubts buried deep inside. When he destroyed it with Gryffindor's sword, the screams that burst from the metal weren't just Voldemort's. They were ancestral cries, centuries of contempt and elitism being severed by flame and blade. Rowling confirmed that the destruction of the locket was more than a physical act. It was symbolic. The sword of Godric Gryffindor, a relic of Slytherin's ideological rival, shattered the medallion forged in hatred. The act was poetic justice, Rowling said in an interview. Gryffindor's legacy of bravery and unity extinguished the bile of blood supremacy. The moment Ron brought the sword down, he wasn't just slaying a piece of Voldemort, he was cutting a link to an older, deeper evil. The locket chose its victims well. Dolores Umbridge didn't stumble upon it. She craved it. The Ministry of Magic may have been fooled by her pink cardigan and kitten plates, but the locket saw the truth. It recognized her thirst for control, her disdain for weakness. When she wore it, she didn't resist its influence. She harmonized with it. The locket fed her, and she fed it. The darkness it unlocked in her wasn't imposed, it was awakened. Even Harry, who resisted so many other temptations, felt the pull of the locket. While carrying it, his nightmares worsened, his temper shortened, his doubts multiplied. He began to see Hermione and Ron through warped lenses. "They don't understand you," the locket suggested in subtle tones. Harry never heard voices, but he felt the weight of judgment in his chest. The locket didn't push, it pressed, constantly, quietly. When they finally opened the locket in the tent, the images it conjured weren't illusions, they were reflections. The locket showed Ron his worst fears, Hermione's imagined betrayal, Harry's supposed arrogance. The ghostly figures kissed and mocked. The locket didn't just want to hurt Ron, it wanted him to believe the lies. The medallion had no mouth, yet it screamed. It had no hands, yet it struck. The history of the locket traces through the shadows of magical Britain. After Myrtle sold it to Burke for a pittance, it was locked in a dusty cabinet. But it hummed with a malevolent residue. Caractacus Burke, the co-owner of Borgin and Burke's, later said that he always felt odd near it. Rowling confirmed that multiple customers returned after purchasing cursed objects, but the locket was never bought. It rejected common hands. It was waiting. When Voldemort retrieved it, he performed dark rituals upon it that the books never fully detail. Rowling hinted in her notes that the locket was taken to a cave drenched in childhood trauma and sealed behind layers of pain and fear. The inferi in the lake, the enchanted boat, the cursed potion, all of these were safeguards, but also offerings. The locket didn't just guard Voldemort's soul, it bathed in his twisted genius. It thrived on it. The cave itself amplified the locket's energy. Rowling stated that Voldemort chose the location not only because it was tied to his past, but because the environment magnified emotional strain. The salt air, the cold water, the dead hands reaching from below, it was a theatre of cruelty. Even Dumbledore, one of the greatest wizards of all time, faltered under the weight of the potion guarding the locket. He drank it and begged for death. The locket watched, and it waited. When Harry retrieved the locket, he didn't save a treasure. He took a wound. From that moment forward, he bore the weight of two monsters. The one who shaped the locket and the one who tore his soul into it. Together they marched alongside him through snow and forest, tents and tears. The burden was not magical alone, it was generational, a legacy of hatred compacted into an object no bigger than a hand. Destroying it wasn't enough. Rowling suggested that artifacts like the locket leave traces behind, residual energy, a haunting. That's why Ron's destruction of it was such a pivotal moment. It was the first time he stepped outside his brother's shadow. He didn't just kill a piece of Voldemort, he defeated the voice in his head. He proved that inherited evil could be undone. That legacy was not destiny. The locket remains one of the most complex symbols in the entire series. Not just a horcrux, not just a family heirloom. It is the thread that binds Salazar Slytherin to Lord Voldemort. It is hate preserved through time. A cursed belief made physical. When it was destroyed, it wasn't just the end of a soul fragment, it was the beginning of healing. The scar still remains in memory and consequence, but the chain was broken. For centuries, the locket was worn with pride, by the Gaunts, by Umbridge, by Voldemort. It was a mark of superiority, a badge of inherited purity. But for Harry, Ron, and Hermione, it became a lesson. Evil doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it slides along a chain, rests on your chest, and makes you question the people you love. It doesn't scream, it whispers. Rowling's confirmation of the locket's dual darkness reframes the entire story. It tells us that Voldemort was not an origin, but a continuation. That the war against him wasn't just against one man, but against centuries of magical elitism, prejudice, and inherited cruelty. The locket was more than a tool, it was a relic of ideas too dangerous to be ignored. In the end, it was not power that destroyed the locket, not raw magic, not force. It was courage, the courage to recognize evil in yourself, the courage to confront the past, the courage to raise a sword and sever the chain. That's what broke it. That's what ended it. Not just steel, but will. Not just magic, but choice. It was a simple piece of jewelry once, then it became a prison, then a mirror, then a battlefield, and finally a grave, the grave of two dark legacies, Slytherin's pride and Voldemort's obsession, both silenced finally by a hand that once trembled but now stood firm. And when the locket lay broken on the forest floor, hissing in its final death, it didn't curse. It didn't cry. It was quiet. It was finished.